The first season of The Last of Us has officially come to an end. Some were fully engaged in following the Oscars ceremony last Monday, while others were eagerly awaiting the final episode of The Last of Us. The episode has already premiered, which means it's time to dive into the freshly released episode. And finally, to have a serious discussion about what Joel did. Why does his decision change the entire meaning of what's happening? Where are our heroes heading now? And how has the new canon seriously altered the original story? So get comfortable, because we are in for a long journey. Well, and also write in the comments if you liked the finale of the first season. Ready? Then let's go. And let's start with the main point. The 9th episode of The Last of Us is almost 100% copy of the game's storyline. Well, that's if we are talking with you about events in the present without focusing on flashbacks, which we'll discuss a little later. Why did we decide to highlight this moment at all? For example, the 3rd episode of the series is filled with a special storyline about the lives of Bill and Frank from scratch. The Kansas City story is also a fairly extensive invention. Yes, Henry and Sam were in the plot, but the local villains in the original game didn't have their own personal history and were faceless antagonists. The same goes for David, who turned out to be not just the leader of the cannibals, but a religious preacher with his own unique history. In short, the 9th episode is very similar to the finale of the first part of The Last of Us. This brings it closer to the first episode, where at the beginning we saw a flashback expanding the lore of the universe, and then watched events that exactly repeated the original. Thus, HBO began and ended the plots exactly as they were in the original. Is this bad or not? No, of course not. After all, we are talking about a plot in which the decisive role is played by the beginning of the story and its ending. The death of Sarah in the first minutes of the game and Joel's action in the hospital. Two shocking stages, completely overturning the worldview of the players, who were thinking about completely different things just 5 minutes ago, without realizing that the characters on the screen will soon face a shocking plot twist. The last episode of The Last of Us left many questions, the answers to which we will continue to seek for a long time. But the fact remains, Ellie would not have made it to the Fireflies without Joel's help. And since we touched on the topic of the final twist, let's delve into it more. Just answer one simple question: is Joel Miller a good or bad character? We haven't voiced our opinion on this yet. Write your position in the comments. Ready? So Joel was never a good guy in the Last of Us universe. Firstly, before meeting Ellie, he was involved in some really shady things, and while smuggling goods can somehow be explained, trading drugs in the first episode as well as killing innocent people are not good deeds at all. As for the killings, we are not even taking into account the events at St. Mary's Hospital. We are talking about a close conversation between Tommy and Joel, during which the older brother clearly expressed that killing innocent people was a necessary means of survival. At the same time, there were other people all around who somehow managed to survive in the QZ without crossing the line. Plus, after the trap in Kansas City, Joel also admitted to Ellie that he had been on both sides of the barricades in the past, and therefore also set traps for random travelers and did bad things. And secondly, Joel Miller deprived all of humanity of a chance for salvation. Learning from Marlene the truth about Ellie's immunity, despite everything, he decided to extract the girl. He killed at least a dozen innocent people at St. Mary's Hospital, as well as the doctor who was operating on Ellie. Thus, driven solely by his paternal feelings, he deprived all of humanity of a chance for salvation. Marlene was right from start to finish, saying that sooner or later Ellie will be torn apart by a clicker or attacked by bandits, because the current world is simply terrible. The Season 1 finale of The Last of Us is a classic story about one person's sacrifice for the greater good, and it's not in the literal sense of the heroes sacrificing themselves to save their comrades, but rather other people must make sacrifices to change the entire world. In this case, it's Marlene and Joel, where only Marlene, who knew Ellie her whole life, was able to take this step, while Joel, who only knew the girl a couple of months, was not. His fatherly post-traumatic stress disorder is the main dual problem in The Last of Us, making Joel Miller a real villain. What makes him better than David from the previous episode? The guy from the previous episode cared for his people, thought about the well-being of others, and took responsibility that his parishioners put on him. But Joel couldn't take responsibility for saving the whole world and decided to do everything his way. This is the duality of The Last of Us that we have talked so much about lately. On the one hand, Joel is a sweet, time-beaten guy who has lost everything, and on the other hand, he has done so much that he is definitely not a hero, but 100% a villain who is pitied. In the original finale of The Last of Us, it changes the narrative angle and turns the just good character into an anti-hero. But honestly, we are a bit stunned by some important details that expand the lore of The Last of Us universe in the series. Let's just summarize the facts we learned from episode 9. The secret of Ellie's immunity is that her mother Anna lied to Marlene. In reality, baby Ellie received a harmless dose of cordyceps through the umbilical cord during delivery. Marlene, on the other hand, believed that the umbilical cord was cut earlier and Anna was beaten later. And it is on the basis of this information that the Firefly's laboratory was preparing. It is based on this information that the theory of growing the healing cordyceps was developed. But from a logical point of view, there is no hope. Anna's lie completely undermines the hopes of real fans that there is a cure for the epidemic in The Last of Us, and sooner or later it would be found with Ellie's help. Rumors even circulated online that in the future third part of the game, the characters from the sequel could team up with Ellie, and she, in turn, would personally go to correct Joel's mistake, growing up and realizing that her adoptive father made a serious mistake. Ellie could very well take such a responsible step and sacrifice herself, giving the world a ray of hope. But if the secret of her immunity is such a rare coincidence of circumstances, then how can we talk about repeating this procedure? Logically, in such a case, it would be necessary to inject cordyceps into every pregnant girl during childbirth, then urgently cut the umbilical cord and kill the mothers on the spot. Well, yes, eventually the offspring will acquire full immunity to the disease, but that's ridiculous. When the series gave us a detailed answer on how the vaccine should have been obtained, the extracted sample was going to be reproduced and then used to vaccinate the rest. But firstly, as already mentioned, this type of immunity can only be given at birth. Secondly, what are the chances of a successful case? One in an infinite number of options, but even then, just by chance. Thirdly, excuse me, but who was planning to grow the most dangerous bacteriological weapon in makeshift conditions based on unconfirmed data? A surgeon from the operating room. Not that he's a surgeon, not a botanist or biologist, just a regular doctor. Experienced? Undoubtedly. But do you want to say that Fireflies has, in addition to a professional laboratory and an experienced surgeon, someone else who specializes in growing special types of mushrooms and making vaccines from them? Oh yes, in the second episode of this series, a doctor who, by the way, had a huge knowledge base, clearly stated that there could be no vaccine. In short, new details, upon careful examination, greatly spoil the logic of what is happening. Yes, perhaps these are just film mistakes, but now these new details are part of the official canon. But we don't believe that Ellie's miraculously obtained immunity could ever be reproduced in any way. Currently, our heroes are heading back to Jackson to meet up with Tommy and Maria. The second season of The Last of Us has already been officially announced. However, don't expect it to come out next year. It's been almost 3 months and filming for the new episodes hasn't even started yet. HBO traditionally takes 2 years to produce their shows, so if you want a show of this scale and quality, you'll need to learn to be patient. We'll discuss the plot of the second season in more detail in a separate video, so don't think that after the 9th episode we'll immediately forget about the greatness of The Last of Us. We still have a big project in the pipeline with a full analysis of the entire series, because many details that we didn't actually talk about remained unspoken and we should still mention them. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you soon with a breakdown of fresh details about the second season.